A very warm welcome to you, to our teaching, and the theme for our reflection is From Outsiders to Insiders. Zacchaeus' episode narrative is one of the most picturesque, scenic accounts of the essence of Jesus' mission. It appears only in Luke. It's unique to Luke. And concludes what many scholars have called Luke's Gospel of the Outcast. And this gospel, a gospel within a gospel, commences in chapter 15. If you recall, chapter 15 begins with three major parables. We've got the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and of course the parable of the prodigal son. And this gospel of the outcast comes to an end with this account in chapter 19, the account of Zacchaeus. The cards are stacked against Zacchaeus. He is both tax collector and rich. He straddles two symbolic worlds in Luke's Gospel. He is a tax collector, one who responds generously to God's call. He is also a rich man, one who finds it difficult to detach himself from possessions. The term chief tax collector is not found elsewhere in the New Testament, and probably, as far as I can remember, not outside it. It is coined, invented by Luke to make this a concluding and gripping narrative in Jesus' dealing with tax collectors. Jesus' assertion in Luke chapter 19, verse 10, I quote, "The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost," echoes God's self-description in the prophet Ezekiel as the true shepherd who will seek and save the lost sheep of Israel. And I quote Ezekiel, "I will seek the lost, and I will bring back the strayed, and I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak." Jesus basically, fundamentally, describes his mission in terms of the will of Israel's God, who seeks out the lost in Israel, healing and restoring the people who have been maltreated or mistreated by its leaders. So what we can say is that there is an identity between the God of Israel, as portrayed in the Hebrew Scriptures, and God the Son. The same mission, the same depiction of their mission. Jesus sees, stops, and asks Zacchaeus to come down the tree, because he must stay at his house today. Let us explore this. God's restoration to wholeness is not in some distant future, but is already set in motion here and now in Jesus' ministry. Salvation, healing, wholeness, restoration is being accomplished here and now, today. Besides, Jesus' stay is, so to speak, constrained, compelled. He couldn't have helped it. By his full obedience to God, it fundamentally pictures what his mission is all about, namely to lead back to God those whom others have written off, but whose heart is nevertheless open to God's grace, to the radicality of God's grace. In addition, he's completely oblivious to the impression the crowd may get because of his association with this chief tax collector. Here is a man who is sought, I'm referring to Zacchaeus, responds and is made whole. That is to say, saved. Zacchaeus' response to Jesus is met by a request. Not merely to eat with him, but actually to stay with him. My dear friends, what does this narrative tell us? What does it tell the church? What is the message for us, for the church by and large? We are being challenged as members of Christ's church to become the means for restoring the lost by seeking them out, not by remaining isolated from them. This episode, this narrative, makes us realize that how the crowd judges us in our associations is not necessarily how Jesus judges. If Jesus had used the crowd's criterion, standard of association, he would never have addressed Zacchaeus. Don't you agree? So, like Jesus, we are also called to be people of encounter. This is one of the favorite phrases of Pope Francis. A people of encounter. Jesus saw, stopped, and invited. Three verbs which lead us to mercy, to be merciful, and to shoulder the pain of the one who is enduring the suffering of isolation. Mercy, as I always say, is never shown from a distance. I need to see, I need to stop, and also I need to invite. I personally believe that one of the mistakes, perhaps blunders, that we can make is to segregate ourselves from worldly people, which means people who are being led by worldly values. To want to lead a holy life is part and parcel of God's call for us. The universal call to holiness. There's nothing wrong about that. However, the rigorous application of this sound and valid principle can jeopardize, put in jeopardy, our association with them for fear of what comes with their relationship. Evangelization depends nonetheless on building such a relationship with worldly people. Our willingness to spend time, talk, and sometimes hang out together with these people can bring about in them a change of heart, a change of mindset, a change of worldview. If we pursue such relationship sincerely while trusting the Lord. Jesus' stay at Zacchaeus' house has taken on this challenge. His initiative was honored with a response. Another outsider who has turned out to be an insider. God bless you.